I'm about to drop a podcast on you, wholesome people. Welcome back to the Dani podcast. This is episode 59, which I'm really excited for because that means I'm only one episode away from episode 60. And as I think I've mentioned before, I'm committed this year to somehow, some way, getting to 100 episodes. The podcast is actually turning 4 this year. So there's 52 weeks in a year, right? So technically, I should be up to like over 200 episodes, which kind of shows my lack of commitment. But that's actually a good transition to what I've been thinking about lately and what I want to share with you, wholesome people. So, as I've also mentioned, I work part time at an Italian restaurant in pizza, which is deliciously ironic because pizza is my favorite food and pizza is still my favorite food. Why? I don't know. One of those unsolved mysteries about my personality, I guess. But there used to be this younger girl that answered the phones, and during shift one time, she wanted to race me. So I said, yeah. So we went outside, and my coworker went with me. And so I have a witness to this or whatever, right? So I lift weights. You can see my barbell right here. You can see our cable machine right there and some other equipment. But I don't do cardio. So I figured she was going to beat me because she is an athlete. And also, besides not doing cardio, one of my friends who I tried lifting with one time was a lot stronger than me. In order to do some form of cardio, we did sprints afterwards, and he would smoke like sprints just to as a form of what's called hit high intensity interval training. So we would sprint, walk back, take a rest, sprint. So you're alternating between like a high intensity cardio and then low intensity, right? So by the time that I'd be halfway done, he'd be done already. So but from not doing cardio and just from other experiences of like losing foot races to other men, right? I figured this 17-year-old girl, she's 13 years younger than me. So she's younger than me and she's an athlete. I think she plays multiple sports. So my friend was there, other people were there too. So I forgot who said ready, set, go. So I start running, she starts running, and she's ahead of me. And then in my mind, her being ahead of me like pushed me to like exert myself, and I caught up to her, passed her, and I won, right? And afterwards, I found out that she cheated. Like she started going before they even said go. So like I like that was it was a huge comeback, right? Because in my mind, we left at the same time, and she was ahead of me, and I caught up to her, and then passed her and won, right? And then I found out that she cheated, so she had a head start. I started when the person said go, caught up to her, passed her, and ended up winning, right? So my coworker who was there with me, he verified that she cheated, and he was like, yeah, so he's like I don't know what happened. He's like, but you were off to a slow start, and then you just took off. So that's what I've been thinking about lately, and the reason that I think it's a good transition is because this podcast has been off to a slow start. Like 50 times 4 is 200, 50 times 2 is 8. So I should be at like 208 episodes. This is barely 50, 59 episodes. And in the fourth year, I'm barely trying to get to 100 episodes. And this year is barely the year that I made a separate Instagram for my podcast. And it's barely the first year that I created a Facebook for the podcast. I generally leave my link tree in the description, which I should probably start mentioning in the episodes. So I'll have to edit my link tree to include the Facebook. Otherwise, you can either search Daniel Flores or Daniel Flores Podcast on Facebook. as of right now, my lovely wife is the only person following the page. Shout out to you, baby. So this podcast is off to a slow start. But I mean, other areas in my life are also off to a slow start. I was off to a slow start when it came to my associate's degree. I didn't start going into to college until 2 years after I graduated, and I went for one semester and then took another year off. And then after that, I went every semester until I graduated my Associates of Arts. My bachelor's in philosophy is off to a slow start. I've been working at it since I graduated with my Associates of Arts in 2016. It's 2023. In 3 more years, it'll be 10 years that I've been working at it. And to be honest, I don't even know if that's something that I'm going to finish, because my lovely wife has a bachelor's in marketing, and she took out some loans to finish that. Well, the entire reason that I started working at the Italian restaurant was to pay off those loans, and we did, thank God. So I am not gonna take out more loans when I don't have any loans right now to finish my bachelor's degree. Before, my employer used to pay for it. They had a tuition reimbursement program, but I was unhappy there, and I didn't want to stay for a long time. I stayed just because of that, because of the tuition reimbursement program, and I didn't want to continue being there because it affected areas of my life that are more important, like my family life. Right. So that's off to a slow start. And I wanted to ask, and you don't have to share, but if you want to, you can. I wanted to ask, like, what's off? In what area are you off to a slow start? And I don't think being off to a slow start is a bad thing. I think we can see it as a good thing, because if you're off to a slow start, well, that means that you started something. You're moving, you're doing something. Of course, just because you started something, it doesn't guarantee that you'll finish it, right? Like my philosophy degree. But it's actually possible for you to finish. It's not theoretical anymore. I think a lot of people don't start things for various different reasons. If you never start something, then it's a guarantee that you won't finish because you're not even starting. But if you start, and even if you're off to a slow start, now there's a real, even though there's not a guarantee that you will finish, there's a real possibility that you will. And there's different levels of difficulty that it might come with, right? And now, if we focus on the word slow, so even if you're moving slow, you're moving, right? And there's nothing wrong with going slow. There's nothing wrong with me being only 60 episodes in my 4th year, because like I said, I was stuck in the not starting for a long time. I started this in October 2019, and I had been thinking about it. I can't remember if it was months before that or even years before that, because podcasts weren't new when I started this podcast. The way that you can tell is because, now it's called Spotify for podcasters, but in 2019, it was called Anchor, and it was a free resource to create a podcast. So an entire company saw how podcasts were growing and how people were getting into them, that they decided to put this free resource out there so that people could create more podcasts, and more podcasts would be available for people who like listening to podcasts. When I started listening to podcasts, that didn't exist. I started listening to I can't remember what year I started listening to podcasts, but I would use Apple Podcasts, and I had a Spotify account. I still do. and I would use Spotify for music. And then when I discovered Spotify had podcasts, after a while of using Apple Podcasts, I tried it out. I tried it out on Spotify, and it was just more user friendly. So then I use Spotify for music and podcasts. Um, I've always used it for music, and now I use it for both. So a lot of people, they're stuck in just thinking about starting a podcast. So they're never going to get to one episode if they just keep thinking about it. But if they start one episode, and even if they did one episode a month, it's a slow start. I think one of the things that made me realize that, I think last year I just did 2 episodes, and Anchor, now called Spotify for podcasters, they gave me my like end of year review, and I created 2 episodes, and it said that I created more content than like 50 or 60% of like the people out there with podcasts. And that was just wild to me, because like I considered last year, with respect to the podcast, like a complete failure, right? Like 2 episodes. The year before that, I think I did the 6 episodes, and then the year before that, 2020, was the year that I did the majority of my episodes. And then 2021 and 2022, I pretty much picked up the ball and then would fumble it, and then pick it up again, and then would fumble it again. And this year I'm trying not to fumble it. But there's nothing wrong with going slow, and there's nothing wrong with not achieving the progress that you could have achieved or wished you would have achieved, and haven't. I think, like I mentioned in the episode about what can you sustain, like I mentioned that story of me going to the priest and telling him that I felt like a hypocrite, but he said, "You're not a hypocrite because you're here and you're not like quitting." So slow progress is better than no progress. And a lot of times, like, slow progress adds up, and eventually you will finish. And by finish, I mean you just like achieve the thing that you set out to achieve. So when I was racing that 17-year-old girl, what I was trying to achieve is to win the race, and I did, right? And there's also the chance, right? So being off to a slow start, and then implies that you're moving, you're starting, so that's a good thing. And then slow progress, you're also making progress, but then also there's the chance that it'll take off. There's a chance that this podcast could take off. There's a chance that, what do you call it? There's a chance that just like anything in your life where you're making slow progress, there's a chance that it can take off. Like a lot of times when you hear these stories about influencers that went viral and they're called overnight successes, like if you watch their interviews, a lot of them will tell you that they were actually doing it for a long time with like little to no progress, and then they finally got noticed. And one thing that I've been thinking about too, so as I've mentioned in like these recent episodes, like I screen print for a living. Well, the guy that taught me is like really good. He's been screen printing for like 10 years. Not 10 years, 20, more than. He's been screen printing like my entire life, right? And so like one of the things that I've been thinking about is like you could be really good at something, you could be like great at something, you could be excellent, you could be like a master, and nobody might know about it. And I feel like my perspective at this point in life is that there's a lot of people out there that are really good at something, experts, the best at something, and they're probably not famous for it. And the reason I think that, and the reason that I say that, is because they're too busy doing the thing that they're the best at, right? And I think a lot of us, and maybe I shouldn't say a lot of us, but I think like me, I think for a while I was like stuck in the mindset that like if nobody knew that I was good at something, then I wasn't actually good at it. But that's just not true. Like fame is a separate thing um, from actually like being good at something. And I think fitness is a good analogy because like I know, what do you call it? I know people in my life that are better at lifting than me, and and they have great physiques, and they're not necessarily famous, and they're not improving their physique, and they're not improving their fitness techniques. They're not improving their squat or whatever to be famous. They're doing it for the thing. They're doing it for the thing itself. And to bring Fulton Sheen into this, and to to wrap it up, um, that way you can think about everything that I said and reflect on if you're if you've even started, and if you have started, are you off to a slow start, and how do you feel about that? um so I have a Fulton Sheen app. I only own like Way to Happiness, Remade for Happiness, The World's First Love, uh Treasure in Clay, Life of Christ. I'm pretty sure I only own 5 books by Fulton Sheen. I haven't read all of them all the way through. 3 to Get Married, 6. But I have a Fulton Sheen app that I paid for, and it's an audio library of all his recorded homilies and lectures and things like that of his life. There was one that I listened to where he was talking about like work, and he was saying that like, and I think he was talking about work in the context of America. If it's not, then that's how I understood it. But I think what he said still will make sense. But like when you work, when you're hired for a job, you'll feel satisfied to the extent that you get the earnings, the income that you and your employer agreed upon. But also, like, if you're not trying to do the thing itself well, then you're not going to be satisfied, right? So, um, part of like being in that state of satisfied is you got paid the wage that you um, agreed to, but then also the thing that you're doing for the wage. Um, if you're not, at first, you can't do it well because someone has to train you um, to do it. But once you get adequate training, that gets you started, and then after that, it should be a constant thing of like self improving the thing that you do, right? And to the extent that you do that, you'll feel satisfied. You're not gonna be completely happiness. You're not gonna be completely happy because a job is not it, it can't carry the weight of your happiness, but you'll feel what they call the the um, the feeling of an honest day's work or whatever. If you don't try to do the thing well, you're cheating. You're not really cheating anybody but yourself. That's where that feeling of like you don't feel satisfied because you know, even if it's not conscious, like you just feel it in your body, you feel it in your being, that you didn't do it to the level that you could. So I mean, sometimes it's not about. Sometimes it's not. I feel like sometimes we feel like taking off, like I said, means just like a lot of people know that you're good at something, but I feel like taking off could just mean that you finally got good at the thing that you do, and now you can do that thing well, and it'll give you that sense of satisfaction, even if it's a thing that like makes you tired or fatigues you. you'll feel that sense of um, satisfaction. And then also just don't quit something just because it's like very, you're making very slow um, progress. Because I mean, like I said, there's no guarantee that you'll finish something you're making slow progress off. But like if you quit, then if you never start and then you start and quit, the guarantee is you'll never finish or you'll never get where you want to go. So that's what I've been thinking about lately. I hope it was kind of coherent. If it wasn't, oh well, I can always try again, right, with episode 60. So make sure you click the link tree. I'm not gonna give a time of when I'm gonna put the Facebook link out there because I gotta work on uploading this episode. But make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you share the episode with someone if you want and you're watching on YouTube. Tell me in the comments if you feel like you're off to a slow start, or maybe you feel like you already took off in something, share that too. But until next week, until episode 60, remember what Venerable Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen said: your life is worth living. That's it, it's over.